my presentation titled to Ocean of Data, an ecosystem for material design and discovery. Again, as the person introduced me, that my name is Zi-Kui. I'm from Penn State. This is my group website, and also I started to build some presentations put on the YouTube channel. All right, so materials and serialization. I want to start with this very big topic because I know that this is the theme of the today. Showing today about the the materials in India, and then we're going to talk about the history of the materials in civilization. Of course, we all know that. Before we can do the make man-made material, we have natural materials with stones, right? And then on Bronze Age, I do want to mention that it's very important. It's usually copper, 12% of 80% of tin alloy. That's the major base of the bronze alloy. And then you have the Iron Age, it's iron carbon. Okay, I highlighted this too because it's very relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. And look at this time, a couple of hundred years, we have industry, manufacturing materials 1.0 to 3.0. We talk about steam engine, steam power, electricity, and computerization. Okay. So I want to talk about this two a little bit more specific. So this is a copper tin phase diagram. Now you see that 12%, right? So 12%, of course, at that time, people didn't know phase diagram. They just try and error. So if you look at 12%, actually it can up to 15.8%. So you can, it's in this range, right? The composition of a tin, that's this range, okay? So this is very special. The reason is because you got a high temperature, you get a single BCC, so a single FCC solution, okay? So that gives you good toughness processing, right? But if you cool down it below temperature, you can precipitate the phases, yeah? So you can strengthen it. So in the history of human civilization, through this trial and error, people find that, gee, you should control to 12% of tin. You don't do too much because they were very brittle. Don't do too little, then strength will be lower. And then look at the iron carbon phase diagram, it's way more complicated. This is the iron carbon phase diagram, temperature composition. You can see that by changing different carbon concentration or different process and temperature, you get so many different phases. Not phases, different structures. Okay, same mainly two phases, right? You can buy three structures. You can FCC, you get BCC or BCT, then you got a cementite. Just as three phases, 3.5, because you do have the BCT or BCC, and you can get so many different properties, right? We call it blacksmith. So that's both are phase diagrams. So what's behind the phase diagrams? Thermodynamics. So that's really the focus of my presentation today, is that this kind of fundamentals behind it. Okay, now you talk about industrial manufacturing and materials 4.0 today. We talk about digitization. So if I take one word to describe this 4.0, it's digitization. So what are we going to digitize? We're going to digitize everything. So we want all the integration of cyber and with digital and physical systems. Want to put them all combined together. You go to manufacturing 4.0, that means you need to digital information for all steps, from the beginning all the way to the products, to the recycle, to the next iteration. And then materials 4.0, as I was introduced about the Material Genome Initiative, that was in the United States, 2011, started. And if you go back a few years, that's the ICME, Integrated Computational Materials Engineering. Okay, so that's ICME. So that's 2008, 2011. As it was mentioned, is I coined the term in 2002. The reason I did that is because when I was working on thermodynamics, working on materials, then we found that the building block of materials, as we typically talking about, processing structural properties, is actually phases. So it depends on what phase you're going to make. Okay. And so let's go back to what do we really mean now, right? We're talking about design material. We call it inverse design. So you have your performance requirement, you get a set of properties, look at the structures, then you look at the process, you look at chemistry. So at the end, you design the chemistry, you design your process, you get your structure, you get your property. So it's inverse engineering. And if you go forward, what is chemistry? Thermodynamics. What is process? Kinetics. Structure is crystallography. Properties are largely determined by what you have, and then plus very important one, defects. Vacancy, dislocations, interfaces. Okay. So then I call this one's forward simulation. So this is discovery. Okay. Another one is inverse design. So we need both engineering and science. That's why it's very nice, right? Materials have, it's not many majors have this name, has this both of them in the name. We have material science and engineering. Because we do both. So you put them together, you understand what's in the thermodynamics. It's the Gibbs energy of individual phases, kinetics is the mobility, and the crystallography, you put individuals together, get a microstructure, then you talk about the defects, okay, properties. And all of them are related to energy. Okay, so what is energy? That's our thermodynamics. So thermodynamics really is the core of all materials, science and engineering, and its processing and properties. So that's why I came up with the name material genome back almost 20 years now. We define this as building blocks for materials. So digitization now, right? Now, what do we really mean by digitization? It's really this is the knowledge. So we have a lot of knowledge. And how can we put them in digital form? Okay, manufacturing. What is really manufacturing? It is basically about your process material to form a product that serve one or multiple functions. And those functions are determined by the phases. When you change materials, you change the phases. You change it from the vapor, liquid, solid, different crystals, right? That's when we talk about the copper zinc, copper tin system. You got the FCC matrix with different precipitates. You want to control your precipitates. And the iron carbon. Of course, now we have a lot more elements into it, but iron carbon is basically two elements, right? So by changing the element, you get a different phases become stable. Some of them metal stable, modern side is metal stable, but it's forms instead of a stable one. So it's all about phase stability. And then how do we digitize this phase stability knowledge? Well, that's thermodynamics. If you think about this one, that's 1870 by Gibbs, 70s. That's 150 years ago now, right? Okay. And then about 100 years later, and we got another great scientist like Kaufman. He decided, well, he not decided, he learned the necessity to digitize this thermodynamics. So he created the cathode method back in 1970s. That's actually, it's really the digitization of thermodynamics, put in the function, put in the formula, okay? So 50 years later, now about 50 years, now it's really become a base now. Cathode become a material design base. So you learn about material design, and all of them will rely on the cathode databases. What will be next to 50 years? So I'm going to talk a little bit more on this one, what I will see that I vision what will be next to 50 years look like for this kind of digitization. Okay, I started with this chart called entropy. Okay. So why entropy is so important? Because of course, the second law is entropy production. And actually everything's governed by entropy. Okay, because any process, if it takes place, it's because it produces entropy. We always wanted is the energy minimization, right? But actually the driving for the process is entropy. Okay, but entropy is multi-scale. You can go to quantum scale, you can go to electronic scale, atomic scale, and all the way to microstructure, and then you can move up. What it can do, you can move to this black hole. That's a very interesting paper, a book by Stephen Hawking about brief answers to big questions. He was talking about entropy and information of black hole. That's very big, right? That's extremely big. And of course, you can also think about another book, very interesting book, called The Order of Time. It talks about it, the whole world is driven by entropy. And those interventions that if you move very fast, the time slows down. If you move as fast as light, time doesn't change anymore. It's frozen there. All right. So entropy is part of thermodynamics. We know that. And Einstein once said that thermodynamics is really the universe content. It's never going to overthrow. So let's just say how fundamental thermodynamics is to us, to the universe, to the world, to the universe. Of course, to material science, because the universe is made of stuff, made of materials. It's a very interesting book. I know that we have not a college student here, and it's a very interesting book about kids produce entropy. What? So they should like thermodynamics. That's a pretty interesting book you can find on Amazon. Okay, now the question is that many of us, when you graduate from college, you get an impression. So thermodynamics is for equilibrium only. Okay, so why is that? Is that really true? Of course, you know it's not true, because otherwise we have no entropy production, right? So it's not true, because when you talk about the first law, we never say it has to be equilibrium. However, if you look at Gibbs in 1870, it's for equilibrium only, because Gibbs was focusing on equilibrium system. Now, if the first law is not equilibrium, but Gibbs put this is equilibrium, what's the difference? The difference is this term, it's entropy production by the internal processes. And if we keep this entropy production, we get a new form for Gibbs energy, including the first three terms we usually see in all textbooks, except the two of them. Okay, all textbooks you see this formula. So that means if you only see three terms, that's for equilibrium system only. That's equilibrium thermodynamics. If you keep one more term here, actually it's a summation of many terms, then it's not for equilibrium. It's for any system. Okay, the key thing would be you have to take the energy not only as a function of temperature, pressure, and the composition, or electric field, magnetic field. You have to also consider the internal degree of freedom. So that's internal variable is the key, right? So that means if we want to digitize thermodynamics, we have to put this term into consideration. That's what exactly what Larry Kaufman did. He introduced a concept called lattice stability. All right, so let's talk about entropy a bit more. So how we learn? What do we learn usually for entropy, right? This first equation we usually learn. We say ds equal to delta Q divided by T. So that means that's what the canonical cycle, you do that process, you find T. If for internal process is for spontaneous process, this quantity must be larger than 0. Okay. And then after a while, you say, you learn another one, you say, oh, no, entropy is not that. Entropy is a Boltzmann distribution equal to KB log omega. Right? Now these two equations are very different. Right? But of course, you can say one's change, one is the integral form, right? So it's very interesting. That's how do we reconcile them together? I mentioned entropy is a multi-scale, but it is not shown here, right? It doesn't say what's multi-scale. Okay, so that means there's some information missing for these two equations. So what is missing? Well, a few years ago, we wrote a paper. It's really talking about multi-scale entropy. Okay, so how do we put this multi-scale entropy into the formula we have? So expand that two equations I just showed. Okay, so what it really means is that the entropy is multi-scale. That means that usually we talk about one scale. Then we talk about configuration entropy. Even for that one, we should talk about the probability because they don't have the same probability. Okay, so that's KB log PK gives this configuration. However, each configuration has its own configurations internally, right? Okay, so now you see that means let's come together, we give another, and give the entropy of this configuration, and then they're going to combine together, get a configuration entropy. So now you see, if you put our entropy as this form, you have two terms here now, instead of only one term. Okay, so this term we talk about it usually refer to this delta T divided delta Q divided by T, or this one is the configuration. Now you put them together, you got the integration of the multi-scale entropy. All right. So of course now you can go down further, right? Okay, you can go infinite. You can go both ways. You can go up, you can down, right? Let's say go to black hole, go to universe. You go down, talk about the quantum level. Okay, but any observation scale you have, that's where you have to do the comparison. Okay, because if your observation this scale, you do at this scale. Okay, but this scale is affected by both low scale and upscale. Okay, upscale is a boundary condition. Low scale is the multi-scale entropy integration. All right, so that means now let's go back to this equation. This equation is very critical. That's how the Earth actually survives, right? We take the heat from the sun. Our temperature is lower than the sun. Okay, so then we get entropy production. So that's a natural process. That's how we get heat. Okay, and however, at the same time, we change the mass. So that's why we don't. It's very rare we see in textbook. We don't have first one, but you have the mass change too, right? We get a meteorite, for example, from the sky. Okay, so it's because of these two, we define the chemical potential. And that is non-equilibrium, right? We just talk about the exchange of heat, exchange of mass. Then something happens on the Earth, right? That produces entropy. So you put it together, that's the entropy, total entropy change of the Earth or any system. You have heat change, you have mass change, you have the entropy reduction. Now let's go to this equation, but S equal to KB log omega. Let me say again, this is a very specific scale. Okay. So it also says that all the configurations have the same probability. They're statistically equivalent. So that's why we see very often in our textbook, ideal mixing in a multi-component system, equal to KB xi log xi. But however, it's non-equivalent configurations. We know that it's very rare two configurations have same energy. Let me have that top of the probability. Okay, so this is the key. This is how the system become unstable and sometimes become all kinds of different configurations because competition of different configurations. Okay, scale. Scale is very critical now, right? Because we have to get entropy right. So you have to look at space and time. So scale is not only space and not only time, it's space and time. So we do the measurements. We measure any measurements we do, we average over space and time. Okay. And the spatial resolution, we talk about the naked eye, optic, SEM, TM. Of course, you can talk about the telescope. And time resolution is also very extremely critical. Okay. So because atom is always moving, electrons are always moving, what you can measure. Okay. So it's one very, very fine structure observation is the X-ray absorption fine structure, XAFS. That is extremely local and electronic structures. Okay, so that's extremely important technology. Of course, we have synchrotron. Synchrotron is for spatial resolution. Okay, this is okay, I do want to mention that. Okay, great. Thank you. And I wrote an overview paper last year, 2020. Then it's a talk about the thermodynamic stability, metastability, instability. Instability is very, very important. Okay. And talk about cross phenomena. And talk about different, we typically see kinetic coefficients, talk about transport properties, that's really kinetic coefficient, and mechanical properties. All of those kind of properties has the free energy behind it. Okay, so if we can make a connection from this free energy all the way up to the macroscopic properties, then we can start to do the prediction and design and discovery too. Okay, so to do all those kind of things, of course, we need a digitize, right? We need digitization. Okay, we need tools. As it was mentioned, I have a book published a few years ago. It's kind of trying to put this together. We are tools are open source. If you go to github.com, Faces Research Lab, we see all our tools there. And our tool has maybe 2 or 3 components. One is data generation. Data generation, of course, you can do experiments, but you can do DFT calculation, quantum mechanics, or you can do machine learning, right? The time scale is exponential reduction. Okay, exponential reduction. And then after you get the data points, you have to be able to process them. You have to get models, right? You have to get in different models. Then you can be able to calculate the properties. Then you want the model development to be consistent, to be fast. extensible. Okay, so that's our two tools to do that. And of course, we also want to do educate our next generation. That's why we have this meeting talk about materials advantage people. And then talk about the training courses, workshops. Now, because it's computational, we do cloud-based short courses, workshops. We have our Material Genome Foundation, is a nonprofit organization. We have our YouTube channels, post our training courses, recording of them. Okay, so now when we get all the tools of data, it's really important about the ecosystem. So what is the ecosystem? You know, nature, right? It's a circle. It's a circle. The trees grows up, leaves drops, and you get the circles, right? So first we have to be general data. Okay, we call it proto data. Just like proto history is raw data, basically. You can get it from the machine learning, from DFT, from MD, from finite element, and the experiment, of course. Okay, but as I mentioned, it's time-wise, it's different scale, right? The experiment takes months, and the DFT takes weeks, and the machine learning takes maybe days or seconds. Okay, but of course that means it's all different, measure different data, but you usually want to put them together. That's the key. Not just the one data is better than another one, but it's the whole data. Okay. And then the process data is that we have to make into database. How to make into database? Okay. And then application. Right, we talk about efficient material design, but I do want to mention that many years ago I proposed the idea called dynamic zero scrap manufacturing. That means you want that the manufacturer has no scraps. How can that happen? That means your process has to be always changing. Okay, any fluctuation had before in the chemistry processing has to be, a tailored. So all the future process has to be changed in situ with the previous process steps you had, fluctuations. And then you can predict the service life, and then you have to complete the material cycle. As you probably know that, for example, Apple just announced that all the iPhone, iPad, aluminum alloys are recycled, 100%. Okay. So of course it's complicated. So you get more data. So this kind of cycle is really we call the data ecosystem. So again, I usually want to put my thoughts into paper. So I wrote a paper 3 years ago now, ocean of data, integrating first principle calculations, that's the first principle calculation, DFT, and the capital model with machine learning. So machine learning becomes very, very important. And had one of our staff at Penn State draw a very nice diagram. Basically means that you have a lot of data. You have data from different producers. Okay, you have some very secret data from companies that they want to share. Hopefully we can combine this data together and process them, generate new knowledge, digitized knowledge, and then do the new design, new process, generate new data, and then connect the string. It's just like how nature works, right? Okay, that's how nature. But of course, where the energy comes from the sun. Okay, the sun provides energy for this process. All right, so let's go back to see what we really do then in our calculations. So if you go back 50 years ago, like what Larry Kaufman did, you take experiment data, you based on knowledge-based estimation, right? Then you do the model. Then you go back to the new experiment and the new material design, you do cycle, right? Okay. Of course, you also know that in the 1950s, there's a density function theory. So basically make the quantum mechanics Schrodinger equation solvable. But at that time, the computer is very limited, right? But now, in the last 50 years, 76, 60 years, half century, computerization has really, really developed. So first principle 0 Kelvin. Now we can do the final temperature too. Okay. Now we can make our model much better than before. Now you can see this kind of cycle here now, right? It's another cycle. So this is I wrote this one about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. At that time, machine learning was at infancy, at least for the science. Okay. But now we're going to have is that we're going to have science, machine learning now, right? So just show DFTK that we actually, in order to make the quantum mechanical calculation easier, we developed a open source code. You can calculate free energy. Okay, use this high throughput calculations. So if you look at the 4 parts here, this is basically the base of materials project. Okay. So this is the tools they have. We build on top of that tool for the finite temperature properties. In this case now, then we have to, this still takes time, right? If you get a lot of data, for example, one of the data is OKMD, and one of the online database has, I think, close to 800,000 now, plus minimum structure now. And then you can think about any structure. We can develop, take the data, develop the machine learning tool. So in addition to do the DFT calculation, that's this 2 bigger database, materials project and OKMD, we can take this data and train a machine learning network, neural network. They're going to predict the properties. When we collect all data in the MongoDB database, they're going to predict the property. For this particular case, formation energy. Again, our code is open source code. You can download them. You can website download them. And now this one, you can put any structure you have, any chemistry. You put it in there, it will predict the formation energy for you. So that, of course, saves time much more. But of course, the prediction is not as, sometimes not as accurate as this one, as DFT calculation. They can do new calculations, use the DFTK to validate it. So it's another cycle there to talk about data generation. Okay, after data generation, we need to aspect development, right? We need to do the model, okay? So we develop another code, aspect.org, to do the development. It derived from DFT calculations, it optimized. More important, it is Markov chain, multi-color can do the parameter estimation and also the uncertainty quantification. To do all of this, we need to use solvers. So we develop a new solver for that, called PyCava. And it uses this SymPy, Python, scientific Python computing. It's a lot of new technologies here, new algorithms. And I'm very proud of my student, my former student, Richard. He went to NASA. He put this code into the competition of NASA Software of the Year and won the 2nd place in 2019. It's not easy. You want to get into the NASA competition. Okay, so what's next? So next is really this recognize data, right? So how do we use this data today? So what we do is that you have some idea. You say, okay, I need to change the cobalt concentration. So what you do, you take you get the idea, do the calculation, right? And then you do a few more calculations and figure out one of the chemistry, they do experiment. So that's called a rational material design. That's what we're doing today. And very successful, like Questag and Apple and all the big companies are doing that. However, as I mentioned, machine learning has been really, really developing in the last 2 decades, so forth. So it's a very important development. It's called the generated adversary networks. Again, okay, conditional, that means because we don't have all the data, we have to constrain ourselves. We can see constrain the conditional, again, CGAN. So it's inverse design. Right. That means in addition, except use our knowledge to intuitively to choose do simulation. Of course, that saves much more time in the experiments, but we can do better. Yes, we can put this knowledge we have into the computer. Okay. So the computer can be generative, right? So it can think. So you basically put the knowledge in there. So we have one paper actually just submitted. It should be hopefully can get accepted very soon. And that case is that it uses the existing data, okay, to generate a latent understanding. This is with the knowledge. Okay, there's another digitization of the knowledge. This time it's not just by equation like the Kappa did before. It's rather by a deep neural network. And after you generate this latent space connection, and then you can give you a design property. And the network will generate the product for you. Okay. So we are using this one in one of our projects now. And that's why we read this perspective paper. I hope we can put it on the archive. So even before the publication, you can download it. I think we can do that one very soon to put it on the archive. So if you search this one in the future, you will see it. Hopefully next week. Okay, so now we got all the data, we got all the framework. We have to have a framework to put them together, right? Okay, so we developed one called materials property descriptor database. Okay, so we put all this inverse design here. We'll put all the data generation. Okay, And then we can design AI for the whole design process here. Then we can extend different properties. We actually talk about 4 properties now. We talk about the hardness, we talk about the creep, we talk about the ductility, we talk about fracture toughness. That's the 4 properties we want to be able to design, inverse design by this framework. And this materials property data descriptor now has around 4 million structure now, and it's expanding. And it is decentralized, so people can get involved. If anybody here want to get involved, you can go here, send us email. We can team up with you, with your team, and to generate more data and also develop more properties. Okay, that's very important because this property models are extensible. We can add more properties. Okay, add more properties. All right, so now I want to conclude my ocean of data is the ecosystem for manufacturing, materials and manufacturing. So we talk about ocean of data. We have the predictive models, we have design materials, we do experiments, we do first principle calculations, we do surrogate models. We go back to general databases and do experiments again. And then we take the data from literature. A user can put their own data into it. So in that case, we really can generate one. It's a cycle. It's an iteration process. So you take the photo data, get the process data, you do SIGA, you must go into the manufacturing, you do the surveys, you recycle, then you come back here again. Of course, you have this big cycle, you have a lot of internal small cycles coming together. So I really like this the concept of ecosystem. So it really gives this kind of big picture, just like how nature works. That's my scientific part. I don't know how much time I have to present the ASM and the materials advantage side. Can I have that 10 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can have 10 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, so we do all this because we need people, right? We need the students. Okay, so we need to have get a student involved in this framework. Okay, as many of you know that we have materials advantage. That's 4 organizations, societies in the United States, American Ceramic Society, and the Association for Iron and Steel Technology, ASM International, and TMS. I'm closely involved with these 2 societies. I'm also actually with a couple other more, but these 2 I'm very, very closely associated. As you know, that the Materials Advantage has 75 chapters throughout the world. Okay, so that's a very international organization. And as many of you know that there are many societies, right? Material societies alone. If you go back to, again, this is a very interesting number, 1870. If you remember that, I mentioned Gibbs developed his theory in 1870s. His paper was published in 1873. It's almost like that time. You just think of this one, the technology development and then science development, right? This really goes side by side, you know. It's hard to say which one goes first, but it's really parallel, kind of, you know, influence each other, you know, around the history. Okay. And this was AME, that's the oldest one in the United States, and it was separated into 4 organizations in 1948. Okay, so that's like 100 years, right? 100 years later, they decided, gee, let's do separate because we're so different. And you can think about these 4 different configurations, right? You have a bigger configuration that become 4 small configurations. And then American Ceramic Society is 1898, and so forth. ASM, 1913. Okay, we're over 100 years old. Actually, Ravi knows that we celebrated our 100 years anniversary in Montreal, and in 2013. That was the first time. The first year I was on the ASM board. That was very, very impressive one. Ravi did a great job there. But there are many other ones, right? Many other ones. Okay, so because this have students here, I want to talk about my experience. I grew up in a tungsten mine, so you talk about the mining, right? Okay. Then my bachelor degree was on process method steel iron steel making. Okay, so it's IST. My master's degree was on the metallographic and heat treatment that the ASM is about. Heat treatment is one of the largest component of ASM. Then I get my PhD on physical metallurgy. That's what TMS is mostly about. Okay? TMS actually had a physical metallurgy annual meeting before, every year, some years ago. So I involved, as you can see now, because this is my early days. Then when I become older, so I get more used to. That's why this too I really involved a lot. So I'm a member of this too for over 20 years. Okay, I served on TMS board, I served on the ASM board, and the president. So let's give the young. I know some of you are here. Okay, you're still you grew up already, so you're a bachelor degree. Okay. And then I'm sure many of you will go to a master's, you go to PhD, and they become professional, right? Okay, so you have to think about what you can do. Right? What will be your path? Okay, I want to congratulations to all the MS students. You know this number in the United States. Okay, there are 2.1 million high school students every year. About that one goes to college. That's about 2/4. To a research, right? And then about 622,000 go to engineering. Okay, now this goes 7%. And then you think about this one that only 4,000 go to material science, right? That's 3%. So that together is a very small portion. Okay, a very small portion go to material science. And even fewer people go to the materials advantage. That's because you are thinking beyond classrooms. You are thinking what is for me, for you in the future, right? So we want to I think you're special. Because you want to do better than your best. That's what I put in my president coin. Let's do better than your best. That's my ASM president coin. And I also have a theory called the TKC theory, and which is now we try to understand that how we should move forward with our career, with our life in general. If you Google it, you will see my YouTube here. If you type Douglas TKC theory, you will see that. Okay, we have a couple of other videos here too. I want to give one slide really talking about what TKC, what my opinion is. So T is for thermodynamics, K is for kinetics, C is for crystallography. So what thermodynamics gives you most of the time, give you the driving force. Where you are now, where you will be in the future. Okay, you define your goals. You evaluate driving force. But then you realize that, you look at the energy curve, right? You have the barrier here, okay? And also, it's metastable, it has to become unstable. Unstable is not good, right? Unstable making you crazy, right? Making you feel, gee, I'm stressed, okay? And then, but you have to overcome it. So you have to find the best path, optimal path to go over. You have to overcome the barrier. There's no process without a barrier. If it is without a barrier, it's unstable already. Okay. That means you're at the top here already, right? There's no barrier, just flow down there. And then how can we reduce the barrier? You have to understand why is the barrier, right? The barrier is because you disturb the system. Because you want to make changes. And the system is against the change. That's second law of thermodynamics. That means you have to be very careful. You have to reduce your barrier, right? How you can reduce your barrier? Coherent. You have to be coherent with yourself and with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues. And you have to be flexible. So that's my TKC theory in one slide. But if you want to listen more, I have about a 1 hour presentation on YouTube. Okay, so what do you like to do after your bachelor degree? I know that MA students are get a bachelor degree. And you can start your own business. I know that many Indian people start their own business. When I visited India 2019, I met many small business owners. Yeah, you can do that one. Or you can go to industry. Then you can get an MBA, right? Turned out 2/3 of students go to industry. Some of them get MBA. And then 1/3 goes to grad school. So if you are 1/3 in grad school, then you have choices, right? You can go to a master's degree, you can get a PhD degree. So I don't have the statistics for that, but this is for my student. I graduated 11 master students, 4 of them get industry, 7 went to PhD. Yeah. And then I graduated 29 PhD students, 13 with industry, 7 to the lab and university, and 2 postdocs. You see, about half goes to industry, and another half goes to the research universities. Okay, so you have to decide what to do, right? There's a movie called Industry. That's good, interesting. 80% of all college students go to industry. So that means, so I don't know how many students I have here. Suppose I have 100 students here. That means 80 of you will go to industry. How part of them maybe not, because you're a MA student. Maybe you will introduce you maybe you want to go to grad school more, right? Maybe in your case, maybe half of them go to industry, half of them go to grad school. Okay. But anyway, if after at the end, 80% go to industry. Okay. So then look at what society should join. I know that you probably in one of them already. So actually one organization here has US is 52% in US members, 30 of them students, 81% are from academia. Well, maybe why don't the people put it there? You can type in a chat and see that which organization you think would be. That's number one. Number two, this time has 48% from academia, US 59%, students 39%. That's number two organization. And the third organization has 79% for industry members. This is like 80%, right? I mean, 80% of college students go to industry. Okay. Then academia is 20%, and now it's 80% in the United States and 15% in the students. Okay. So I think it's nice if everybody can put in the chat and see 1, 2, 3, if you think which organizations there are. Okay. Now I want to do. I was going to show a video, but if you can go to YouTube, you can see that one. ASM headquarters. It looks very nice in the structure. It's actually as YouTuber. You can see from the sky and you see how it looks like. It's really beautiful. This is a beautiful garden here. Okay, this is our structure for this one. So if you come to the United States or come to Cleveland area, I highly encourage to visit it. It's open. You can just drive there. There's no. You can walk around. Okay, it's all open area there. You can look at it. Very nice place. So ASM is Information Society, and it has about 20,000 members. It's the largest materials society in the world, as far as I know. And it is really the professional development and the technical information about materials. This is inside that part. And materials information goes back to the history at the beginning. So why ASM was formed at the beginning? Okay. Now is that actually back in that's 1913, right? They want to form a state-treated club because they want to exchange information. They want to change how you do the heat treatment, so you can learn from each other. And then in the 1920s, they started to come to the exposition. Okay. Then it's going to exchange information. Let's see what equipment you have, what products you make, how you make them, right? So that's back in 1990s, right? 1919. It's very long, 100 years ago. And then you get a lot of publications after that. Okay. And in 1921, we started publishing transactions and put information in exchange. Then society important thing is a word. We'll give a word and the data sheets and best practice. And we have a lot of handbooks. Okay, 38 volumes now. That's the largest materials, the handbooks available, compiled. And everybody, I mentioned digitization. Now, of course, you have to go digital, right? We have to go to digital database. We have journals, we have digital databases, we have digital library. And then if you go to the education, we have a lot of courses to teach. You have self-study courses, online courses, and classroom and in-person courses too. Okay, so for the materials advantage students, as I mentioned, that you are special because you are thinking far away from aware out of your box, and not only classroom. What's next? Well, you can join chapters. We have ASM chapters. We have 8 of India. I think it's 9 now, I believe. Number published update now. And then you can join the technical committees, get involved with publications and the conferences. You can join our affiliate societies. We have 6 of them for specific different areas. And as students, you can also join our student members. ASM board has student members. Every year we got 3 new students. And we have this time we have 1 from India. I mean, in India. Yeah, if you go to our website, you can see that. one new member. You can involve with task forces, and you can then get nominated committees, then become leadership at ASM. With that one, I just want to say all the best to you, to your study and career. I hope to see you at ASM. Thank you. Okay, now I conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Karthik?
Yes, so the audience, if you are having any questions, you can post it in.
I think it is already in the chat box.
Yes.
Okay, so I should go to the chat.
Actually, you can look at the chat box.
Okay. Yes, I can. I see it.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is how does the mass of solar winds influence Earth and other planets and other star systems? Oh, that's actually a great question, Debbie. Thank you very much. And you see, when I wrote that paper about multi-scale, actually I was working with a colleague from the Department of Ecosystem. Unfortunately, he passed away after I should have our paper published. And we were talking about how the forest operates, okay? And of course, now you think this is solar wind, right? That has high energy. And it also has particle transport, right? So it's very complex, but the idea is really that if we want to understand the entropy change of a system, okay? So we have to do the three things. We have to really quantify heat exchange. That's the first one. Then we have to quantify the mass change. The mass is really hard, right? Because you have this solar wind, how do you quantify it? Okay, is that are you going to put a part of the heat or not? Okay, and then the most important one is the third part. But not most important, it's not the important part, it's the third part, is entropy production. So you have to be able to talk about the internal processes happening in that system. For example, you talk about a tree, right? You have to think about what's happening in that tree. Okay, on that tree. And above the ground and under the ground. Then you can talk about the tree as a system. Okay. So it's very complex, but I think it's really interesting to study this one. Yeah. Okay. Debbie had another comment about the thermodynamics. Yeah, that's right. I tell you, that equation I mentioned, it's, as I mentioned, the only two books really have that one. One book is by Max Hillard. He was my professor. I learned from him. And then I wrote in my book too. Okay. And for thermodynamics, it's so interesting. I learned thermodynamics 3 times. I taught 20 years. And I practiced it in my research for more than 20 years, 30 years now. Yeah, actually more than 30 years now, since 1987. Yeah, so it's just a fantastic area things you can do with that. Okay, let's move further.
There is another question. How does the neural deep learning work for commodity grade commercial materials that are not well defined or homogeneous?
Yeah, so that is very important. The system is not homogeneous, right? You first have to decompose it into individual homogeneous system, subsystems. Then you predict the properties of the individual homogeneous systems and then put them back together. Use statistical mechanics. That's how we predicted the critical point. We actually created a new, we wrote another small review, just send out for publication. And it's talk about this kind of very, very critical called multi-scale entropy. All right, so let's see.
There is one more question. How do you take care of entropy effects in calculations done at 0 Kelvin?
And what?
How do you take care of entropy effects in calculations done at 0 Kelvin?
Yeah, so what you do is that at 0 Kelvin kind of energy, right? Then when you want to calculate the entropy at a final temperature, you have to, it's multi-scale already. Okay, so you at least have 2 scales, 2 scales now. One is the electronic scale, and that's the photon scale. So you need to get 2 scale in place for each configuration, for each homogeneous system. Then you have to take all different homogeneous system, calculate all of them, I don't know how many you should calculate depending on your system. We did like hundreds of them. Okay. Then you use a statistical batch to form a big picture at high temperature. So the very important concept is that at a high temperature or at a high temperature, you're not talking about one configuration anymore. So the macroscopic measurements is a statistical ensemble of many, many configurations.
Okay, this may be the last one. Professor Ravi would like to know what is your current book of interest?
Current
book of interest. Book
of interest? Ha.
Yeah, he has just finished reading A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, that's right. So I actually, I'm very, as many people, I'm very busy. I didn't have time to read a book. So I have not read books for many, many years, but I travel a lot, right? I travel a lot. So about 20 some years ago, when I came to Penn State, and actually even before that, I found that I spent a lot of time on driving. So I started with the library to borrow like 20 books, recorded books, put in my car. So whenever I drive, I put that tape, CD or tape in the car to listen. So I listen a lot of books on that. Many books. It's actually, you wouldn't realize how many books, this huge amount of books I read. I listened. I didn't listen. I don't listen to news. Okay, I didn't listen to news, because I don't think they're useful to me. But I listen to books. So, and the iPhone came in, right? And the iPhone came in, and then I listen. I got the app, so I get digital books. So again, anytime I'm not doing anything else, when I'm doing the clean the dishes, I do the exercise, I listen to books. So I can finish a book, a couple of weeks, a book, like 10 hours, a book. So that's what I do. So in that audible I use, my wife used to. I actually see all the books. We discuss books. We are a lot of books on that one. I think actually, if you talk about the one book, I can actually highly recommend that book, particularly for students too. That book I found. I mentioned two books in my presentation, right? I really want to mention one this book. I think is a fantastic book. Let me put in the WeChat, put in the chat.
Yeah, this is a comment. This is a comment from one of the participants that he says that, dear Professor Liu, you are kind of modern Einstein who tried to evolve unified theory of relativity. I am amazed at your knowledge level. So it's a compliment to you.
Thank
So
you.
I think now I will hand over to Dr. Karthik. I think we have to now go to the concluding session. Thank you, Professor Zi-Kui Liu, all the way. I have troubled you with accepting the time that you have mentioned. It is my mistake. I should have corrected at that time. But for that, you have done a wonderful lecture today. Now I will ask Dr. Karthik to go to the next part of the talk. Thank you, Professor Liu. Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
And you gave a
Thank you.
wonderful opening to Materials Advantage and ASM International also as a bonus. Yes. Yeah, Karthik.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for such a comprehensive and enlightening talk. I am sure all of us have learned a lot from it. I think this was such a different and exciting topic for all of us to get to know about. So thank you, sir, for clarifying all the doubts and questions. I am sure everyone now has a better understanding about the topic. And also your open source links and the YouTube videos, website links, all of them very much useful to all of us. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So next, we will move on to the concluding session of today's workshop. So after such an enlightening event, we are now finally coming to the end of the workshop. So I am sure we all are happy with the way this workshop turned out. For the concluding session, I would like to call upon Dr. Yu Kamachimurli, Trustee-elect, ASM International, And so there is no need for introduction for a stalwart like Dr. Kamachi Madali. Still, for the student participants, I would like to introduce Dr. Kamachi Madali. So, Dr. Kamachi Madali has made pioneering contributions to production of heavy water and specialty materials, advanced materials and coating technology development, corrosion science, engineering and technology, materials process and equipment development for reprocessing applications, failure analysis, consultancy, and societal contributions for 36 years of during his service at Department of Atomic Energy, India. So Dr. Madali has 465 journal publications, 5 patents, and 9,500 citations with an huge H index of 43 and I-10 index of 245. So Dr. Madali has co-edited 20 books and proceedings. So he is an associate editor of Journal of Electrochemical Society of India, editor-in-chief of IIM Springer book series and CIA Corrosion Management Committee booklet series. He has guided or coordinated combinedly 162 projects of UG, PG, PhD degree students from various academic institutions. He is recognized in the world's top 2% scientists from India in the field of materials, and is a fellow of 12 professional associations, including 3 from abroad, and honorary member of Indian Institute of Metals and UDCT Alumni Association, Mumbai. So Dr. Madali is decorated with several distinguished recognition from India and abroad, including a Distinguished Alumni Award from IIT Bombay, where he did MTech in Corrosion Science and Engineering during 1984, and PSG College of Technology, Coimbatore, where he did MSc Material Science in 1982. GD Birla Gold Medal and Metallurgist of the Year Award from Indian Institute of Metals and Government of India, Best Scientist Award from TNSEST, Chennai, Muscat National Award, Excellence and Meritorious Awards in Corrosion from NACE India and NCCA Karaikuri, Vasvik Award, Indian Nuclear Society Medal, Homi Bhabha Science and Technology Award of Department of Atomic Energy, Outstanding Faculty Award from Homi Bhabha National Institute, deemed to be a university, Frank Newman Speller Award of NAS International USA, the highest recognition and first Indian to get in the field of corrosion. Dr. Madali was visiting scientist and widely traveled to USA, Germany, Russia, France, UK, Japan, Malaysia, Israel, Bulgaria, Canada, and Singapore. So Dr. Madali was the president of IIM during 2019-20 and is currently the trustee-elect of Board of Trustees of ASM International USA for the period of 2021 to 2024, and formerly chairman of ASM International Chennai chapter during 2015-2017 period. Sir, please take the stage and grace us with your presence.
Very good evening to all of you, and good morning to the foreign guests. I think that we are going to finish it in another just 10 minutes, this event. Respected Professor Ravi Ravindran and Professor Zi-Kui, the former presidents of ASM International, Dr. Depi Alia, the former president of the Failure Society of Failure Analysis Society, and Professor Kamraj, Chairman ASM International Chennai chapter, my senior colleagues from ASM International Chennai chapter, and the faculty advisor and the student office bearers and the members of the material advantage chapters of SRM IST chapter and the NIT Trichy chapter. Warm evening to all of you. I have to quickly finish as we are already running very close to the closing time. And it's a wonderful day today. On the eve of the 75th Independence Day, the country is going to celebrate. We planned such an event where we will have 4 eminent speakers from national and international arena and have wonderful topics on what that has been achieved in the last maybe 7,500 years. And looking at the talks that have been given today, it's, I think, amazing to see the speakers covered wide network of the areas that they have been working on. The first talk started with the Professor Christopher Byrne, who is also our former president of ASM International. He gave a wonderful talk on the advances in thermal spray coating and applications, and his focus was on the solution precursor plasma spray processing for creating nanostructured as well as oriented grain structures, which will columnar grain structures that will give better property for thermal barrier applications. And that was a wonderful talk, and he covered in length. And there were numerous questions that also he could answer everything, most of them. And this talk went off very well. And followed by that, we had Dr. M. Satyaprasad and Dr. Dhanasekaran from Ashok Leyland from Chennai, India. They spoke about materials and manufacturing for future mobility, particularly on the electric vehicle, EV. And that was a wonderful talk. They covered about the history of EV and its evolution today and what will happen in the next 20, 30 years with respect to the EV. And then also they have covered much about the materials part, the difficulties in manufacturing and the resources like the magnet materials, availability, dependence on China, and how to overcome the indigenous production. They covered in length everything, and it was a very good, synergy between both of them, mutually discussing the topic. It was like a brainstorming and a interactive session. And followed by that, we had the third talk after a short break by Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee, who is the Vice President of Tata Steel, Kolkata. And he gave a wonderful talk on the new materials for 21st century. And he very nicely explained taking advantage of the pandemic situation, how the medical world is evolving to create the virus resistant materials, starting from healthcare to biomaterials of various types. And they also covered many other wonder materials like graphene, the high entropy materials, and the carbon fibers, the composite materials, many advanced materials that will play a key role in the future, particularly looking at the developments in the energy scenario with renewables like solar, wind, requiring advanced materials and new materials, as well as he also touched about the clean technologies, the hydrogen production technologies where new materials are required. It was a very good talk that gave almost like reading a textbook. You could get all the information on that. And topping it all now, the last lecture, instead of calling him at the last minute due to the coming confusion in the time, Professor G gave a wonderful talk on the designing and tailoring of frontier materials for their processing and properties. It was amazing information. He started with the copper, 12.8% tin, the ancient first ever bronze material made in our country, India. Then followed by the iron carbon steels, the wrought iron Delhi iron pillar, and the carbon wood steel, and also a variety of the modern materials up to the high entropy material he touched upon. And all of us should understand why he was passionately explaining that, because over 3000 BC, from 3000 BC to today, okay, 2000 AD, we have 21st century, we have numerous volume of data that has to be there, and that's what he mentioned as ocean of data, and how to handle this ocean of data for an ecosystem to have materials and manufacturing that will serve to the industry 4.0. And that was his passion, and he gave very good examples. He also gave a lot of links for the young students to go ahead with that. And topping it all, that what I was planning to also speak here, he very nicely covered about materials advantage chapter and the advantage that the students will get. He took his own example that when he was doing his MS and PhD, how he got benefited with the interacting and joining various material societies. And also he gave the advantage of being a member of ASM or materials advantage. What are the benefits that you get? And he gave finally the example of many people coming to the top, including himself as the president of ASM, serving to the materials community, the global materials community. It was a wonderful final talk. At this time of late evening in India and early morning in USA, I am very grateful that all of you have been waiting here to complete the session, and I have no doubt that everyone got benefited by attending all the 4 talks that has been beautifully conceived by the ASM International Chennai chapter, along with the Material Advantage chapter of SRM Institute of Science and Technology and the National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. Thank you so much for all of you being with us, and special thanks to Professor Zi-Kui, Professor Ravi Ravindran, and Dr. Depi Aliya for joining all the way. I know that Dr. Depi is sitting from early morning, from 4:30 a.m. to listen to all the talks, and she is our Indian friend. She has been always, she is always, amazed with the way the Indian metallurgy people work, and she is very fond of interacting and networking with her. I hope that we will have another session with you in the future, madam. We look forward to you, and I thank all of you. And once again, Jai Hind, and thank you. And hope that tomorrow we will meet all of us at 11 o'clock in the morning Indian time for another special lecture that will be delivered by me. Thank you very much, and bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for briefing the overall workshop happened today. So once again, I am back here to deliver a vote of thanks. Yeah, warm good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. It is one of the rare occasions where we are having speakers and participants from different time zones, Eastern, Western, and Central part of the world. So it gives me immense pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks on this one-day workshop, Frontiers in Materials. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Kamashi Mudali, Trustee-elect ASM International. He is the initiator of the event. So he has started the idea, and he has interacted with all of us to start this event, and he has encouraged us to do the things. So he has finalized the speakers and wonderful talks for this one-day workshop. So thank you very much, sir. It is my honor to thank all the speakers of today's workshop: Professor Chris Burnt, Dr. Satya Prasad, Dr. Dhanasekaran, Dr. Devashish Patacharji, and Professor Zi-Kui for sharing your knowledge with all of us. And also big thanks for all of you for sparing your valuable weekend time with us. So thank you all. Your friend in need is a friend indeed. Today it has been proved. Thank you, Professor Ravi Ravindran, sir. I sincerely thank all the esteemed guests around the globe and the participants. You people have made the event a grand success. Thanks for the enthusiastic participation in the question and answer sessions. So thank you all. So I should thank management of SRM IST for allowing us to use the Zoom platform for the current event. So next, I am grateful to Dr. M. Kamaraj, Professor HAG, IIT Madras, and Chairman ASM International Chennai chapter. So he is the real coordinator of the event. So he coordinated between the Material Advantage chapters, NIT Trichy, and SRM IST, and ASM International Chennai chapters. Every one of us is residing in different localities, but he has beautifully coordinated between us for successful conduction of the event. I would like to thank Dr. Sushanta Kumar Panikragi, Dr. Suprajit Bhaumik, Dr. Vinod for their enthusiastic cooperation in organizing the event. Finally, I sincerely thank the Material Advantage Chairperson, Mr. Tanmay and Mr. Achita, and their team of students for putting their sincere efforts in making the brochure, publicizing this event, and their contribution towards organizing this event. It was our privilege to be able to conduct this workshop, but sooner or later, everything must come to an end. So this brings us to the end of our workshop on Frontiers in Materials. I am sure all the participants are leaving with a greater sense of understanding of the topics covered today. If I have missed anybody, kindly forgive me. So thank you all. Have a good day. So,
Okay, thank you.
that's just a
Thank you,
small-
sir.
Thank you.
Feedback
Thank you.
form has been posted. Participants can fill in their feedback or suggestions so that can be taken care in the later events. Thank you all. And especially I want to thank our office bearers of SRM IST Material Advantage Students Chapter, especially Raghav, Satish, Gurpal, Pulkit, Prince Kumar. So they are the actual people who are began this event and who has taken all the steps to circulate the brochure and creating the brochure, etc. So thank you guys. Thank you all, sir. Thank you all the
Thank
review.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See you
See you
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Bye, sir. See you tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Ravi Ravindran is left. Huh?
Thank you, sir. We'll meet tomorrow.